Hello, and welcome to Fighting Over the VCR. My name is Matthew.
My name is Nancy.
And welcome back to the podcast where my sister and I discuss movies that we grew up watching. I want to thank you all for listening. And this week, this is kind of should we call this game night?
It is like a game night.
It's game night.
It is game night.
But no clue this week.
Yeah, no clue. There's no board games.
There's no board games. Tonight it's games that, well, it's movies with the word game in them, basically.
Mental games.
Mind games?
Mind games.
I don't know. So later in the podcast, I'm going to be talking about a movie that I really like, and I'm really glad I got to rewatch it, called War Games. But Nancy's going to get us started off talking about a movie that is just straight up The Game.
The Game.
Not to be confused with the rapper The Game.
I don't know who that is.
I don't know him very well either. But there is a rapper named The Game. and it's like post, I don't know when it's probably 2000s, I think is when he became big. I don't know.
You know more than I do.
There's a rapper named The Game.
Okay. But that's not what we're talking about.
No.
We're talking about David Fincher's 1997 movie, The Game, starring Michael Douglas and Sean Penn and Deborah Kara Unger.
Say that 10 times fast.
Oh, yeah.
Kara Unger.
Kara Unger. So The Game, those are the three main characters, Sean Penn, Michael Douglas, and Deborah Kara Unger, who she hasn't really done a whole lot other than this movie. Like, this is her main credit. Looks like she does a lot of Star Wars voiceover stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
yeah, it's kind of weird. Michael Douglas plays Nicholas Van Orton, and it is his 48th birthday. His younger brother, Conrad, also called Connie, kind of has been distant, or they just haven't connected for a long time.
Well,
it's been about 2-3 years.
They're estranged from each other.
Yeah.
The last time they saw each other was at their mother's funeral.
Yeah.
Conrad is played by Sean Penn.
Yeah, and he's kind of a troubled dude,
He's had some drug problems, had some personal life problems.
Yeah, they grew up as a very wealthy family, and
very wealthy.
As some people with those kinds of means, sometimes they, don't make the greatest decisions in life or whatever. So anyways, it's Nicholas's birthday, and his brother pops up out of nowhere, and they meet up. He pops up as Seymour Butts.
Yeah,
he meets him at a restaurant.
Yes, he leaves Nicholas a message under the name Seymour Butts about going to lunch for his birthday.
Yeah.
They then know at that point to go ahead and have their lunch under that name.
Yeah. So Connie and Nicholas haven't spent a lot of time together in the last several years. They were together at their mom's funeral, but they hadn't seen each other in a while. And Connie wanted to give Nicholas a birthday present, and he gives him this invitation to a game put on by CRS.
Well, he doesn't say it's a game. He tells him to call them.
Was it CRS or CSR?
CRS.
CRS.
And he tells him to call that number. It'll change your life.
Yeah, he had done it himself in London at some point and changed his life.
Yeah.
So lunch breaks up. A couple weird things happen at lunch. Like from the very beginning of from this lunch forward, there are things like kind of like accident things that keep happening to Nicholas.
The waitress spills iced tea on him. I don't think anything else happens before that.
Not that. Okay.
No. But he gives him the card, and he's like, what is this? And he's like, just do it. And he's like, I don't like surprises. And then all of a sudden he has Connie sets up the entire restaurant to sing happy birthday to him.
Yeah. He's a very, very rich investment banker. He's a very controlled person. His entire environment is very regimented, and just everything in his life is very controlled. Period.
And he's extremely antisocial.
Very, very antisocial. His assistant comes in at one point and going over their social calendar. He's like, I'm not going to any of that. Forget it. And then she's like, why do I even ask? And he said, well, I mean, if you had to be around these people, you'd understand. He just does not want to.
It's actually not, and it's not even that. It's that he's more like, if I don't understand, like, if I don't socialize with these people, I don't feel like I'm being left out. Is kind of how he takes it.
He has JOMO, not FOMO, the joy of missing out, not the fear of missing out. But we also get to see him be kind of a ruthless businessman. You know, he wants to, I believe, consolidate or take over.
He's shutting down a business that is is hurting his investors, and the stock is going down.
Yeah, so we get to see this kind of cutthroat side of him, and he's divorced. He's been divorced, I would say, 5-7 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not even that long.
Yeah.
But his ex-wife calls him on his birthday, wants to check in on him. So she still cares for him.
And he's very rude.
He's rude, and he's just very isolated. I mean, extremely isolated. The most interaction it seems like he has is with his housekeeper, who I believe has been in their with their family his whole life.
Yes.
And another note about this is, he's turning 48. His father died when he was 48. In fact, his father committed suicide, jumped off the roof of their house, and he saw it. And Nicholas was maybe like 10 or 11.
Maybe.
And Conrad is maybe 5 or 6 or something at the time. So you kind of have this history. So because Nicholas is turning 48, the same age that his father was when he died, there's a lot of this kind of ominous feeling through this whole movie. He does agree to go to CRS and kind of get put through these tests and whatnot. But honestly, Matt and I don't really want to reveal a lot of the plot from here on out, because the rest of the plot, it is a very David Fincher movie where there's lots of twists. And if you haven't seen this, even if you have seen it, it's still not really fun to talk about all the little twists and turns that happen in the movie.
I think the best way to describe it, because if you watch the trailer, you'll see this.
Yeah.
Is that he agrees to play this. When he goes to CRS, they tell him it's a game. He's like, fine, whatever. It was a gift. He agrees to go through with it just out of also because of his curiosity. I think he's just curious, like, what it is.
And maybe a challenge, something to conquer.
Yeah, something other than the business world and everything. And they, throughout the rest of the movie, they turn his life upside down.
Yes, in a very destructive, like, very, very destructive, almost life and death kind of manner.
From invading his privacy to, putting him in life-threatening situations. Yeah. And really kind of pushing him and challenging him in ways that are out of the, very much out of the comfort zone that he has created.
Oh, yeah. The character who we know for a majority of the movie, Christine, she kind of plays this very primary role in this game. He ends up being her mark through this whole game. So she's, from the very beginning, before he even agrees to do it, she's the waitress that spills tea on him. And she ends up being kind of his only real link to explaining what's going on and providing, but also moving things along.
Yeah, it's more for moving things along, He could very easily say, I don't want to play this game, and just sit in a room all day and not care.
Yeah.
Instead, he has to have this force that is, really kind of putting him in situations that, move the game along.
Yeah. I think without going into, like I said, a lot of the twists and turns and whatnot, I think what's more interesting to talk about with this movie is kind of the larger philosophical questions that come up with it. I mean, it's in some ways it's kind of an It's a Wonderful Life story in the sense.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Without having the whole you've get to see what the world is like without, if you'd never been born. It's not that kind of a twist, but it is if you have everything stripped away, do you still have any hope or any desire to move forward.
Yeah, I made that exact, like, when I was thinking about this movie, I made that exact same kind of correlation where it's like as if the first, like, 15 to 20 minutes of the movie were 90% of It's a Wonderful Life, and then everything that happens after the bridge scene of It's a Wonderful Life is like the rest of the movie, where you're just kind of...
It's like It's a Wonderful Life inverted.
Kind of.
Because it's almost like he's living in Pottersville most of this movie.
Yeah. I wouldn't call where he lives in San Francisco Pottersville.
No. Oh, Michael Douglas. He gets to film in San Francisco a lot. What a lucky guy.
Well, other than The Game and Streets of San Francisco, the television show from the 70s, what else has he done?
Ant-Man.
Oh, that's right.
And Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Two really fun movies. Yeah.
I mean, and it is very San Francisco. I mean, they're not afraid of showing the street names and cable cars and driving down the hills and speed chases.
The bridge.
The bridges. Oh, it's so great. So it's kind of a little bit of a love letter to San Francisco.
This is this movie's directed by a great director, David Fincher. And looking at the movies that he's done, I think we figured out that this is the first of 3 movies that he's had take place, if not all of, but somewhat in San Francisco. You've got...
I know 2 of them.
The first is this movie, then Zodiac, which we reviewed in episode 5, and then Social Network, which has a lot of Bay Area, San Francisco kind of ties.
More Silicon Valley than San Francisco.
Yeah.
Not exactly the same.
But it's got a lot of scenes in San Francisco. But Fincher grew up in Marin. Marin County.
That makes sense,
so
then.
He's got some connections there to the Bay Area.
I would say the geography of San Francisco makes this movie even more interesting because
it's kind of a character.
If you've never driven through San Francisco, it is a maze. Driving through the city is like playing a game in itself. There's one-way streets. There's so many steep hills. You can get really turned around. I personally don't really enjoy driving through the city at all.
There's the crookedest street in the world.
Exactly, Lombard Street. I mean, it is an interesting place, and it's incredibly diverse. There's so many different little pockets and neighborhoods and whatnot. So, I mean, you can see so many different things in one. I don't even know what the square mileage of San Francisco is, but it's a very interesting place for a film like this.
Yeah, one of the other areas where the movie is filmed is at the Van Orton estate, which they make sound like is in some place in San Francisco, but if you know anything about San Francisco, seeing a house like this, there's no way this is San Francisco. And in reality, no, it's not. It was actually filmed at a place in Woodside, California, named the Filoli House, which is the Filoli. There's a huge garden there, and it's south of San Francisco, kind of in between the bay and the ocean on the peninsula.
Yeah.
And it's very beautiful. If you're ever in the Bay Area, I highly recommend, maybe going there. It's not the cheapest kind of tour, but it's a beautiful place to kind of roam around. That house was where they filmed a lot of the interior and exterior scenes. So, for example, there's the courtyard where he sees his father at the beginning of the movie in the flashbacks. Yeah. And a lot of the flashback scenes of them in like the kitchen and everything like that all filmed at the Filoli house.
That's really cool. Okay, that's a really
there's that definite like Bay Area connection that Fincher brings into this, which is really neat. And like I said, kind of like in the Zodiac, it ends up being a character.
Yeah, very much so. In addition to kind of this reevaluating your entire life as a result of a 2 to 3 day, 4 day experience or whatnot, it also really pushes Nicholas Van Orton to question everything, like question every person he knows. He becomes incredibly suspicious of absolutely of everything.
He becomes incredibly paranoid, and that's kind of part of a good part of the game is about getting him out of his comfort zone.
Yeah.
And he's created this world around him that he is in complete control of, really gets turned upside down.
Yeah, this person of incredible means has all these things taken away from him, through the course of this game. And the thing about the game is that he signed up for it. You know, he more or less gives access to all these things in his life. Two elements of this movie that I think could be challenged is the idea that this company can anticipate every single move he's going to make.
Well, he comes in and you don't know if it's like part of the game or not, but he ends up doing like a 5-hour examination where they're doing like physical examination, psychological, and all, asking him all these questions and everything like that. And part of me, like I'm like 75% thinking like that was all part of the game, and like 25% of it was like necessary for how they created the game, because the game, with everything that they do in this movie, there's no way it was set up that quickly. But you have to also remember that they had Conrad there to really give insight to his life. I mean, who knows how much reconnaissance was being done, to prepare for the extreme measures that this company goes to put him through the hell they put him through.
So, I mean, it kind of comes to this
Spoiler
question
alert.
of, how much can a person, like, how predictable are people versus, do they really have a lot of free will, and would they really make several different kinds of decisions? Or would your sibling, that's what's so perfect about this movie, could your sibling truly predict how you would react in all these various scenarios? I mean, did the CRS people maybe sit down with Conrad and say, okay, this is what we're going to do to your brother. We want to set these multiple different things up. You tell us how you think he's going to react, because you're someone who's known him your entire life.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. No, but I mean, I wonder if, the only two people we ever hear who've experienced this game are Nicholas and Conrad. So we don't really know how this works for anyone outside of the Van Orton brothers. But is the background that is done where there's like this long conversation with a sibling to figure out, okay, let's really figure out this guy? Or, are these psychological tests really going to reveal all these things? Or, because what if someone deliberately answered all those questions opposite of what they meant to?
At that point, though, they probably would have known that. I think what really happens is, like, Conrad gives them some sort of access to and some insight into Nicholas's life, and then they spend an enormous amount of time preparing. It's not like Conrad went to Target and bought this card right before they had lunch and then got them. He said, I've got this
gift card off the rack at Target.
I decided to get you this profound life experience for your birthday. Here's
what
a
an
balloon
excellent
with
birthday.
it.
You don't want flowers.
Thank you, Target. You have everything.
Profound life experiences on aisle 8. Love it.
But I'm
next
sure
to Jenga.
I'm sure at some point they had to have done a lot of research to kind of figure out like all the different things that and who knows, like it could be like a choose your own adventure kind of thing where depending on what decision Nicholas makes might take the game in some other kind of direction.
Yeah.
I mean, I think ultimately when you get to the end of the movie, you see like there was like a specific goal that had to be reached that they had to plan for.
Yes.
But the
one guy says, if you hadn't done this, I was supposed to do this. So like the same outcome was to happen.
Right. I'm gonna go ahead and jump to my favorite character in this.
Please go ahead.
Michael Douglas is amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
But even though he probably only has maybe 10 to 15 minutes of screen time, I think Sean Penn is my favorite character in this movie.
He's wonderful.
He's really only in 3 scenes. He's in the lunch scene where you meet him and he gives him the gift card, the birthday card, the Target gift card. Then in the middle of the game, he shows up.
And he's panicked and paranoid.
And freaking out. And that's also where one of my favorite scenes in the movie is, where he and Nicholas, aside from the game, start having a confrontation about their relationship.
Yeah.
And, he brings up, one of the key things that he brings up is, that, Nicholas, as the older brother, didn't need to be his dad in his life or help him with it or help him along the way or anything like that.
Yeah.
And Nicholas is like, I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And that is like that's a very key moment about their relationship, about his personality.
Yeah.
He witnesses this death of his father at a young age and how that shapes his whole personality. And now he's the same age that his father was. And how is he going to, does he want to live up to his name? Does he want to, be bigger than his dad was? Does he want to be different than his dad? And that's that's one of the key themes with it throughout the movie.
I agree. Sean Penn is excellent in this movie, and his character is really great. But I think Christine is my favorite character.
Why?
I know we talk a lot about how a lot of women aren't represented in a lot of these movies that we've watched, but I thought she was very interesting. And I mean, I know she was incredibly manipulative, but she was just a different kind of character than I've seen in things. And I remember from watching this years ago. So I saw it in the theater. Side note, our dad turned 48 the week that this movie came out in the theater.
Weird.
I know, complete coincidence. But I've always kind of thought our dad looks a little bit like Michael Douglas too, kind of a Robert Redford, Michael Douglas kind of mix, if I had to pick two actors who our dad looks like.
They're about, Michael Douglas and Robert Redford, aren't they pretty close in age too?
Robert Redford is older, and our dad is not as old as either of them.
No.
But I've always thought that if he's similar to any actor, it's those two. So the fact that Michael Douglas is starring in a movie about a 48-year-old man the same week that our dad turned 48 was just very weird. And I did see this in the theater. I don't know if I saw it right the week it came out, but I saw it pretty soon after. I just thought she was a very interesting character. And while she acted as though she cared about Nicholas. I mean, like she says at the end, you don't know anything about me. So this movie wasn't driven with any kind of love story or anything like that. I mean, it was driven because there was this strong, interesting woman in the mix, and what you kind of gather at this kind of like company party is what I'll call it. Not, each of these games kind of has a different lead, and that she just happened to be the lead in this one.
Yeah.
So
sometimes she's just a walk-on.
Yeah, but I don't know. I like I said, I haven't seen her in anything else, but I really like her in this movie.
I mean, she's not. I don't dislike her. I don't think she's a bad character. I don't think that it's poorly acted or anything like that.
She's got a lot of screen time. I mean, she's in at least 40 to 45 minutes of the film.
She has the next most screen time. Yeah, probably. After that, it's probably his lawyer, who is played by Fox Mulder's dad.
I was just saying Fox Mulder's dad.
But I think I would agree that she's definitely like the next main character. I mean, Sean Penn only probably gets higher ranking as far as like his name on the poster because he's known. He's more known, even though he has far less screen time.
Yeah.
No, I thought that she was good. What was your favorite scene?
This is kind of hard to pick.
And it's hard. It's also hard to say because you don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah, I would say maybe it's after he goes to the Chinese food restaurant and then finds that actor and then takes that actor to the lunchroom. And when I say that actor, I'm not saying someone employed to make the movie the game. I'm talking about someone who literally is known to be an actor in the movie. He advertises a prescription med, like Tanagen or something, or Tangine or whatever that was called.
I don't know why you're being vague at that point.
But I mean, I think that lunchroom scene, because I feel like that was a moment where he was trying to kind of exert a little control over this whole shitstorm that had happened to him.
Yeah, that's a good scene. I believe the scene that you're referring to takes place in the lion and tiger cages at the San Francisco Zoo.
Well,
that's where it's filmed, at least.
Oh, the lunch scene is not that's not what I mean. I mean when literally they go to that lunchroom.
Oh, the lunchroom scene. Oh, okay.
But he is with the actor. It's after he gets the actor from the Lions and Tigers, and either way. But it's like, oh my, it's in like the last third of it's in the last act of the movie.
Yeah.
But no, this movie is incredibly suspenseful. Like your first viewing of the movie, you really don't know where it's going to go. Like, you don't know how it's going to wrap up. It's David Fincher, so it's always a mystery. You don't know what he's going to do. Yeah,
the first time I saw this movie, I was completely, like, did not see the plot twists coming.
At all.
Of course, now when I watch it, I'm like, oh, this is so obvious.
Yeah.
But the first time I watched this, I just... immediately when it was over, I was like, this movie is amazing.
Me
because
too.
The twists and turns in the movie, like, I never saw coming. And it's a fun kind of ride. It's suspenseful.
Very stylish. The style is really cool.
I mean, Fincher, he's great. He didn't write this; he just directed it. But his style is very, he's always kind of dark. He always, he not very flashy and kind of gritty, and you really get a lot of that in this movie. And I've always just really liked it.
I really like this. One of the style choices he has is when he's trying to show Nicholas thinking back in his old memories, he uses old film. Like he's basically playing film reels, like no audio kind of film reels from like the 50s and 60s that Nicholas Van Orton would have had. Shots of his life. So
his memory is basically like an 8mm film.
Yeah, it's really cool. I thought that was a neat thing that he threw in.
And all the like very kind of thoughtful scenes, like all the flashbacks or whenever he's kind of in the house thinking about like his life. There's this really great piano music playing in the background, which. I don't think it's Eric Satie, but I think it's very inspired by that.
Agreed.
And it sets a very good tone for the film. And I can't recommend this movie enough.
How many times have you watched it?
Me?
Yeah.
Heck, I watched it twice to prepare for this podcast. And I think the last time I saw it, it's funny. I always see, like, if it's on TV, I'll stop and start watching it, and I always, everyone has this. There's always this one scene where I always catch it at.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say what that scene is because I don't want to give too much about the movie.
You can say it in a vague way. Just kidding.
Yeah, vagueness is not Nancy's.
There's keys.
But anyway, no, I probably see it at least once every couple of years.
Really?
Yeah. I if it's on, I'll watch it. I can't remember the last time I just sat down and put it on, but I'd have to say, it's up there as far as David Fincher movies go. It's up there on my list.
I've probably seen. I guaranteed have seen it start to finish at least 3 times. Maybe 4, but I don't think I've seen it more than that. And I don't think I've watched it in at least 10 years.
Oh, really?
Maybe longer. But
no, I always enjoy it.
Speaking of David Fincher films in general, today is David Fincher's birthday. Oddly enough, another random coincidence. We're talking about birthdays.
I don't think he's turning 48.
Probably not. But what are your favorite David Fincher movies?
I had seen we've talked about another one of his movies, Zodiac, which I would probably put number one on my list as far as David Fincher movies. I've seen, I believe, every David Fincher movie. I'm trying to think of one I haven't seen, but
I haven't seen Aliens 3.
I would put Aliens 3 in my top 5 only because I really love the Alien series. But I think that was his first feature film, and he has vastly improved since that movie. And in fact, he even doesn't like it. Wow. Which I find very surprising, because I still really enjoy it. It takes the Alien series in a different way, which is...
I've never seen any of the Aliens movies.
Oh, man. Always disappointing me.
Excuse me.
Anyway, I would have to probably put Zodiac number one, primarily because there's that kind of, I like that it's a non-fiction kind of movie that, because we live in the Bay Area, there's those personal ties to. Yep. And it's just a damn good movie with great acting. After that, it's basically kind of like if I was just doing 5, it would be like a 4-way tie.
Oh, okay. What's your 4-way tie?
I really like The Social Network. I've seen that a ton of times. Saw it in the theater. That is a really great movie. I don't even care how much of it is fact or fiction. It's just really well done, and the music by Trent Reznor is amazing in that. He won an Oscar for it, so gotta love that. Then the next movie would probably be, let me see.
Well, they're a 4-way tie, so it doesn't really matter.
It's so hard though, because I like so many of his movies, and then I'll like blank on like which movies they are. I like 7, but there's like a goriness to 7 that kind of turns me off sometimes, and one of the actors in it is kind of problematic. I really like Panic Room, and a lot of people don't like. They put it like, if they're ranking Fincher movies, they don't like it as much. But I really enjoy Panic Room.
It's funny you mentioned Panic Room, because doesn't it have Jared Leto in it?
Jared Leto.
And here Sherry and I just started to do a My So-Called Life rewatch. It's like, Jared Leto didn't have cornrows in My So-Called Life.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Panic Room.
So I think you're done. I think you said 4. I think you said 5.
No,
you said Zodiac. I'm assuming The Game is one of them, right?
The Game, yeah, The Game is in.
And Aliens.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if, like, I'm not gonna put Gone Girl in that top 5. Gone Girl's okay. I just found like I don't have necessarily like a lot of issues with Gone Girl, but that is not a movie I want to watch again.
I want to watch it again. It's in my top 5.
I had only recently seen Curious Case of Benjamin Button within like the last year, and I kind of liked it. I thought it was kind of interesting. A lot of people compare, like, I remember one of the things that people said about Benjamin Button was it was a lot like Forrest Gump, and I was like,
your
what?
Favorite.
I was like, what? But no. And then let me see, 7. Trying to think of anything.
Well, let me start with mine, because I think there's movies in mine that you're not mentioning. So
okay.
The Game is, I'm not going to put them in an order, because kind of like Matt, it's hard to really rank them.
Yeah.
I've tried to do this before. I don't want to try and do it again.
It almost seems like
I'll just
every
talk
time
about
you watch one
probably
of them.
my 5 favorites. So definitely The Game, Fight Club, Gone Girl, Zodiac, and I'd say Social Network would be in there too. Panic Room would not be. I haven't seen Aliens 3. 7 is so great. 7, I think, is a very interesting movie, and it's very intense, and I do like the idea of a serial killer following that kind of guideline. You know, like the whole idea of the 7 sins and whatnot, and like. But yeah, that movie is almost like a horror movie to me. in terms of just how scary it is and just how desperately gory it is. I mean, it's rough. I think I've seen it twice, and I don't know if I'd ever want to watch it again.
I really like Fight Club until the twist at the end, and then I just think and then it like negates the whole movie for me.
We might be talking about Fight Club at some point.
That's fine. I just think I just really, and I haven't read the book, and maybe there's something that I just am not getting from the movie that if I read the book maybe I'd get. The twist at the end when you're watching it made me feel like the whole movie was a cop-out.
I don't feel that way. I still really enjoy the movie.
I mean, I seriously, like, I'll put it on and I enjoy watching it, and then, like, the end comes, I'm like, it's time to turn it off.
I mean, and Brad Pitt, he's pretty hot in this movie.
Brad Pitt, I am not a Brad Pitt hater. I'm not. He's a good actor. He's fun to watch. We
just saw him in the new Quentin Tarantino movie, and wow, he still looks pretty damn good. He took his shirt off on a roof and didn't even need to. I was like, whoa. That was for the ladies. That's why he did that. Well, do you have any other final thoughts on the game?
There's a creepy clown doll in it. That was my only other. No. Well, here is where actually this brings up an excellent point.
Go ahead.
We were talking about earlier, like, how do they know so much? Like, why would they put, like, when they are kind of introducing the game, why would they have, like, this little creepy clown doll in it?
Yeah.
And if you remember from one of the, like, reels from his past at the birthday party that you see during the opening credits, there are 3, like, clowns that are performing at that party. So it could have been that Conrad had given them, like, old, like, footage from their past and everything like that, like growing up, and that's how they got some of the information.
And you know what? I kind of like that idea because then it really plays into the idea that CRS got into his mind, like really like got into his head. Like if they were looking at old footage from his childhood and he was upset, like replaying a lot of that old footage in his memories. Yeah. This movie is trippy. But it's awesome.
I guess the only other thing that I'd say, and this is opening me up to a whole gigantic can of worms that I'm about to open. I was watching this the other night, preparing for the podcast, and I started thinking about it. Like, if someone had, as long as like life or death or like financial demise or like anything terrible were to happen, if someone were to set up like a game or scavenger hunt thing like this elaborate for me, I would totally do it. That would be fun. Like with the puzzles and everything, where I had to drive all over the Bay Area to figure this shit out. That would be cool.
That's very different than
extremely different. Extremely different. But I was just thinking about like if someone were to set up like a personalized scavenger hunt for you to kind of like do within a 24-hour period for your birthday, where you had to go like solve, like find clues and keys and all this other kind of stuff.
There was an episode of that on Parks and Rec, a Valentine's Day episode, where Leslie had set up lots of crazy elaborate clues for Ben to have to figure out, and he was super struggling, so he was able to recruit Ron and Andy to help him run around Pawnee and figure all this out. And of course it didn't end with any kind of crazy death scene or anything like that.
So you're saying that it is a feasible thing, and that if someone wanted to do that for my birthday, that could happen.
We've got many months to plan that. My birthday comes before yours. I don't know if I'm requesting this though.
Well, man, after we're done, I got to go to Target and get a CRS gift card.
Target. CRS gift card at Target. Love it. Well, do you think we could get global thermal nuclear war at Target? We didn't even get that video game there.
It is a Target. Oh man, you just set him up and I hit him out. All right, so my movie is actually one that I am so glad that I got to rewatch, because watching it now with my eyes now and my brain, my brain now, as opposed to when I was like 5 or 6 years old watching it on TV, is definitely like you get it this time.
It completely went over my head as a kid that the whole premise of this movie was people can't be trusted to make that critical decision. We need to put it in the hands of a machine. I didn't really understand that as a kid. I
kind of got that.
I understood Matthew Broderick's role from like, oh, I'm going to dick around and play with computers. I'm going to be a hacker and play some games. And that part I got, and I got that he went too far and got in trouble, but I didn't really understand.
Thanks for just spoiling my whole summary.
Sorry.
So we're going to talk about War Games, a movie that came out in 1983, in the midst of the Cold War, and stars a very young Matthew Broderick, Ali Sheedy, pre-Breakfast Club Ali Sheedy.
Exercising Ali Sheedy.
Yes.
She like runs a lot in this movie.
Has
leg warmers on, stretching,
doing aerobics.
Yeah,
you know, she's gonna be on TV.
Exactly.
And Dabney Coleman making his second appearance on the podcast after Muppets Take Manhattan.
Yep.
But yes, as Nancy was,
I totally spoiled Matt.
Spoiling for me. The movie is about Matthew Broderick plays 16, 17-year-old high school kid who loves video games. You see him in the arcade. You see him, and eventually you see him at home on his a very new thing in 1983, a personal computer.
They use his floppy disk the size of record albums.
Yes, 12-inch floppy disks, and where he has a modem, but the dial-up is a literal phone that you put on a connecting device where you take the receiver. The receiver connects to the computer using a dial tone to communicate.
It was so awesome.
And he's kind of, he likes his video games, and he's got some hacking abilities. He likes to hack into the school computer. In fact, he intentionally gets in trouble in a specific class just so he can go to the principal's office because he knows where the password is.
Yep.
And look up the password so he can go in and manipulate all of his school records.
This is like ultra computer hacker Ferris Bueller version.
And almost to the point where it's like,
I mean, Ferris Bueller didn't cause these problems.
Everything he learned in this movie, he did not realize, I'm going to have to do this again in another movie where I have to change.
The tone of that movie quite different than the tone of this movie.
I don't remember him being absent 9 times. Anyway, so Matthew Broderick's character, David Lightman, again, he likes video games, and he's looking at a magazine where he sees that this company, Protovision, out of Sunnyvale, California, and at the time, David and his family live in Seattle, are coming out with all these new games. So he tries to figure out a way to hack into Protovision so he can play these games for free before they get released. And while he's doing research and trying to do all this, he inadvertently hacks into a supercomputer at NORAD that is in charge of all of the United States nuclear weapons. And when he does finally get into the supercomputer, he decides to list the games. Now, the supercomputer was developed by someone who was at the time doing very early work with artificial intelligence and trying to teach computers how to learn. So what he does is he uses games to teach the computers how to learn. So the supercomputer has games in its memory banks. So when David accidentally hacks into it, he lists the games. He sees poker and chess and stuff like that. But he also sees guerrilla warfare and the famous one, global thermonuclear war. And he decides, I want to play that game. Which then starts our whole story of him running this test simulation of global thermonuclear war, which then triggers a terrible string of events that are all kind of happening behind the scenes. Like we all see everything happening on screens and stuff, but you don't see like tanks rolling out or subs going under the water or Russians running around or anything like that. But this test simulation gets misinterpreted by Russia and the United States as actually happening, and the rest of the movie is them trying to stop this test game from happening on the supercomputer known as the Whopper.
The Whopper.
Them trying to figure out how to do this. So he gets arrested by the FBI. He gets taken to NORAD to meet Dabney Coleman, who's the person who is in charge of this supercomputer.
Yeah, he's really, really pushing that machines should be in charge of global annihilation.
Yeah. So at the beginning, before we meet David, the movie opens up with a scene in a silo. Mm-hmm. One of the actors is a very young Michael Madsen.
I know, that was amazing.
Which, when you see him, like when I saw him, I was like, "Is that Michael Madsen?" Then
Doesn't
you hear
he
that
chop ears off of people in later movies?
But then you hear his voice, which is so distinct, and after you hear his voice, you're like, "Whoa, hey, it's Michael Madsen."
Yep. And John Spencer.
John Spencer, he was famous for being in
West Wing.
West Wing, that's it. Yes. So this movie starts with them in a silo, and alarms start going off, and they have to go through the motions of launching a nuclear missile, and it all turns out to be a test, but they don't pull the trigger, and John Spencer's character is sitting there like, I need to get, like, he's having doubts of whether he should do it or not. Later, the following scene you see is Daphne Coleman with like a general and a couple people from the government,
bunch of suits
with badges. They basically are debating whether, there's humans in here, they don't have the guts to pull the trigger.
Didn't they say 30% didn't do it?
Yeah, a huge percent. I mean, that's pretty big. But so because of this, they call the president on like the special phone, and they replace the human element at that point and put in the Whopper to control all these nuclear warheads. And this is probably the largest kind of like story plot point that I did not understand watching this as a kid.
Yeah, I didn't understand John Spencer and Michael Madsen doing that test that they didn't realize it was a test, and then John Spencer having doubts. And I didn't understand the board meeting where they all decide, oh yeah, computers need to be in charge.
Yeah, all of that.
Oh, totally over my head as a kid.
Yeah, now obviously I have a much greater understanding of it. Mm-hmm. I've watched enough movies and real life news to understand.
But I mean, this movie coming out in '83, this had to feel so real for people, or like the threat of this being an option. Had to feel very, very possible.
Well, you bring up an excellent point. I'm just first of all, this movie brings up a lot of really philosophical and kind of timely moments, and ultimately, we'll just spoil it. David saves the world. Okay, they stop it.
I mean, he almost blows up the world.
He almost blows up the world, but they stop it.
He saves.
We're all okay at the end of the movie. This movie's very timely in a lot of ways because, one, as you brought up, like, you and I did not, like, we didn't go through a time where we had warnings and where we had to, like, we were afraid that nuclear war was about to start. Even though we were in school at that time, we didn't have drills like our parents did.
No.
And I mean, we had like earthquake drills and fire drills, but we didn't have like nuclear war drills. And in watching this, I thought about that, like, man, we didn't have to do that. That was probably pretty real. And then I realized, no, now people today have to do the same thing for mass shootings.
Yep.
And that was pretty scary. I mean, they could really kind of take that kind of same kind of paranoia and fear and of, we don't know when this is going to happen and how do we prepare.
Yeah.
And you can really apply that to a lot of things that are going on now.
Well, you can also apply it to the idea that elections are porous and easily hacked by Russians.
True.
There's that too. There's a TV show that I love that's coming back for its final season in a couple months that felt, I was kept thinking about over and over again watching. This was Mr. Robot, because he's, in addition to them having the exact same wardrobe, I guess T-shirts, jeans, and hoodies are probably like your standard hacker wardrobe. But, they both have I don't think Matt watches the show.
I don't, but I'm familiar with the theme.
But just this very anti-establishment kind of characters that really want to mess with the system. David, while yes, he wants to just play games for the most part, he also has no interest in going to school. He is a deviant in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Not judging or anything. But he definitely doesn't fit in. He's definitely someone who feels like he's kind of, because I never noticed previous times quite like I did this time. He's really socially awkward too. He's odd. He's really odd. And Elliot in Mr. Robot has a lot of the same problems. He's got a lot more problems than David does, but there just seems to be this element of these kind of offbeat characters feeling very comfortable manipulating people's private information and breaking into systems and things like that. And anyways.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's kind of fun for me to watch in this movie is the technology.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were very lucky to be introduced to computers at a very young age.
King's Quest, baby.
We didn't necessarily have 12-inch floppy disks, but we definitely had the 5.25-inch floppy disks and a monochrome monitor, and not a. And we actually, even before that, had a computer that we hooked up to our television, and you didn't save anything on disk. We saved it to a cassette. Do you remember that? And you programmed it with ASCII text. Do you remember having that?
No.
And it played video games a little bit. But just watching the technology, and one thing that really I thought of too was computers back then were super expensive. I don't know how David had all this stuff in his room. He wasn't.
Well, his mom is a real estate agent, so maybe the real estate economy was booming in Seattle back then.
I don't know, but it seemed like it didn't seem very realistic for a kid to have this in his room, the stuff that he had.
Yeah.
But at the same time, who cares? But then again, looking at the Whopper, the power that was going through that in all of NORAD is probably less powerful than what you have in your pocket right now. It's pretty crazy. So that's fun for me to watch.
Sure.
Not just kind of as kind of a tech geek a little bit, but also it shows the times. Mm-hmm. They made a sequel. I think they tried to redo this movie, and they kind of made it like a sequel, and it came out, I think, in the 2000s, the 2010s, called War Games, Dark Code or something like that.
Oh, that's stupid.
And it's it wouldn't feel the same because technology is so different. I would almost rather watch Live Free or Die Hard, I think was the Die Hard movie with Justin Long and Timothy Oliphant, where there's a huge hacker kind of aspect to that.
Just watch Mr. Robot instead.
That's a little more now than what's going on.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I thought about, this was probably one of the first movies, because I saw this. I didn't see this in the theater. I was too young, but I saw it a few years later on TBS or something. This was another one of those played on TBS all the time kind of movies. But this was probably one of the early ones that I had watched that really kind of made me think about how many military based movies came out in the 80s.
Oh, an incredible amount.
I mean, we'll probably talk about a couple more of them later, but
tons.
I mean, there was they were I don't know if it was just like, hey, this is what makes money or what, but there was definitely like a Hollywood push to like really feed the anti, communist Cold War paranoia to like sell tickets with like Commando and Rambo and Top Gun and all these different kinds of movies. And there's some that, I remember watching that, Iron Eagle,
I remember that.
American Ninja Warrior, or not American Ninja Warrior, American Ninja. American Ninja Warrior is a totally different thing.
That's different.
I do watch that though, because that's kind of fun. I sit there and wish I had the flexibility and skill of the people on that show. But and it's funny though, but like as a kid of the 80s, like a lot of us just grew up on, I mean, we had like G.I. Joe and all this other kind of stuff. We really grew up with like this whole militarized kind of childhood.
Well, Reagan.
And yeah, I mean, you had that. You see it in a different light now.
I want to point out that I feel like the general is made to look very goofy and silly.
I don't think so.
His language is very juvenile.
I think it's just his.
He doesn't sound as intelligent as everybody else in the room.
I think it's just the character that they've written has kind of like a Texas kind of Southern background. I mean, they show him like chewing tobacco in a few times, and maybe it is kind of he's the first person to be like, I don't think we should have computers running everything.
Yeah.
So he's definitely of sound mind there, but
I think because he sounds kind of unintelligent, he just sounds like, oh,
Are you saying people with Southern accents are unintelligent?
No, I'm saying the way he chose to describe things, like this is before you guys were even watching Howdy Doody, or just some of the darn tootin'. Like, there's just certain things about.
That's just it's just.
I don't know.
I never took it as they were trying to make him less intelligent, or I think it was just his background. I think if you were to describe it, I would say the cowboy aspect. And I think that is not a criticism, but that is a way that I think I've seen it in other pop culture things where America is described as a bunch of cowboys, and that is our mentality, is a cowboy mentality.
Yeah.
And maybe it was a commentary by having him having kind of a cowboy background.
I think that sounds right. That sounds fair. The only reason I say I interpret them trying to portray him look less intellectual as the other guys in the room is because the other guys in the room who believe so much in the machine could theoretically seem intellectually superior. So therefore, you need to follow what they're saying because, of course, the machine makes sense. But then, of course, that whole idea gets blown up with what happens during the movie.
Right. A couple other things I wanted to mention is
Joshua.
No, Joshua, that whole kind of story with the creator of the Whopper and the games and everything like that with his son and Joshua and all that is very interesting, kind of sad. I love how, and I've seen this I saw this in another movie. So in War Games, they have like a speaker on the computer that will speak out the dial, like the typing that the computer is doing, and that's a great trick for the movie. So David, as he's typing, can be saying what he's typing, like hello Joshua, how are you, let's play chess. And then the computer has a speaker on it, so in this computer voice it'll say that. There's another movie that does this from the 80s called Jumpin' Jack Flash with Whoopi Goldberg.
Haven't seen
it. It's pretty good, and that has kind of a hackery kind of aspect of it too. But they do the same thing, and she's communicating with like a British operative, and then when she finally hears in the movie, she hears what his voice sounds like. So anytime he is communicating with her on the computer, they just have the actor talking.
Oh, that's cool.
So you don't have to read her monitor.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cool. No, the other thing that I was going to mention is I remember watching this movie, and there's certain things that David does and he's very smart. Mm-hmm. You know, we can tell, like, there's a scene where he is locked in, like, a medical office at NORAD, mm-hmm. and he is trying to escape, and he figures out how to break out by, like, taking a tape recorder and some clamps and hooking it up to this keypad, like the other side of the wall of this keypad that has, like, this tonal kind of code that goes in, and he breaks out. And I remember, like, being a kid being like locking myself in the bathroom and with the ability to unlock it, mm-hmm. and being like, oh, I gotta break out of the bathroom. What can I do? And, like, going, like, to light the light switch and, like, pretending like I'm hooking up something from the drawer in the bathroom to unlock the door, and, like, you know, just playing. But I remember mocking, like pretending that. And then there's a scene where after he does break out, he's on a road and he takes, like, a piece of metal, undoes, like, the receiver on the phone, on a payphone, and hook. Wow. Kids, look it up. And just takes the piece of metal and hooks it up to the magnet and puts it next to the phone, and, like, somehow gets a dial tone to get a free phone call. Yeah. And I remember being like, that was the coolest thing. Yeah. That doesn't work, but
I always pictured that piece of metal being the tab off of, like, a soda can.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
So, you know, he couldn't find quarters on the ground, so he used that, and he just hacked his way into the phone.
Yeah, like, the MacGyver things that he does were really awesome, because it's nice to see that someone's not just smart when he's in front of a computer. I mean, he's really, you can picture that he can build things. And
another thing I wanted to bring up is what I just wrote in my notes as impractical travel. So the movie takes
3 hours from Seattle to Colorado.
The movie takes place in Seattle. When David first gets arrested, he's outside of a 7-Eleven. They pick him up in a van. And then, like, the next scene, in the same clothes and everything, he's at NORAD, which is in Colorado. And for the longest time, I kept thinking, like, growing up, Colorado's, like, right next to Washington, right? It's right next to Seattle. And then he gets wired money to take a flight to Oregon to go try and find the person who created the Whopper. And I'm just thinking, like, oh man, all these places must be really close together, because all this happens within, like, less than a day's worth of time. And no, impractical travel.
Very impractical travel.
And there's some sort of, you know, time jump someplace, or some, like, little wormhole where they can get from place to place.
Can I tell you my favorite character?
Sure.
Falcon's my favorite character.
Yeah, Falcon is
the
great.
best. He not only is he my favorite character, but he's the main character in my favorite scene too. So my favorite scene is when they finally get to Goose Island and he's flying around his remote control pterodactyl. And then, you know, the kids come inside and they, you know, are trying to convince him, you need to go to NORAD. We need to deal with this. You don't understand what's going to happen. The whole world is going to, like, blow up. And he kind of is like, kids, you want to watch this movie about dinosaurs? Like, see how these dinosaurs went extinct? You know what? Everything goes extinct at some time. Maybe this is just our time. Like, he's totally nihilistic about this.
It's super creepy.
It's so super just creepy. Like, if we all die, I guess it's our time. In fact, I chose to live here because we'll be right by a blast site. We'll get evaporated like that. Boom. Like, we'll be dead right away. I feel bad for those poor saps that are going to end up with cancer and, like, die a slow death. Like, that's the worst for them. It was so intense.
That scene is creepy AF. It freaked me out. I was like, rewatch. Like, as a kid, I didn't get it.
No,
then
rewatching all of it's over our
rewatching it, I'm thinking, like, oh, this guy just doesn't give a crap, and he knows that he is probably integral in the annihilation of half the planet, and he's basically come to terms with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and doesn't want to stop it.
And we find out later that they all know, like the the government, the spooks or whoever, they all know he's alive. I mean, he still gets these DOD checks. They kind of created this new identity for him. So
yeah,
it's
because
not
they
like
didn't want him interfering with their plans.
Exactly.
Like, he basically was like, this is a terrible thing that you guys are doing, and I know I've helped create it, but I can't destroy it.
Yeah.
And, what are we going to do? So let me just live my life peacefully.
Yeah.
I mean, and also his family had died, so he's alone. So he doesn't feel like he has anything to live for anyway.
Yeah.
But
what about your favorite character and favorite scene?
man, I really, while he is kind of, I think I just really like Matthew Broderick in this movie.
Are you sure you don't like Matthew Broderick's dad?
I'm not a great fan of his dad, although when rewatching this movie, his dad did something that I remember emulating as a kid and I have now inspired my wife to do. Is his dad puts butter on bread, like he butters the bread heavily with butter, and then takes corn on the cob, and instead of trying to put butter on the cob, just rolls the cob on the bread. Like spins it around on the bread. And I remember doing that as a kid a couple times because of this movie. And I showed this to my wife, and she was like, that's amazing. I'm doing that every time I have corn on the cob. Even if I don't have bread, I'm going to grab bread, put butter on that, because it's hard to butter a corn on the cob.
It was hilarious.
His
parents kind of remind me of the parents in Heathers. Like his parents remind me of Veronica's parents. They're just kind of there.
No, they're not. I think they kind of have an integral role, a little more influence than Veronica's parents.
Yeah.
No, I want to say, like, I think Matthew Broderick, while he's been in a ton of things, if you say Matthew Broderick, people immediately think Ferris Bueller. Mm-hmm. But I think that if this movie would have been as popular or come out later and he was in it, this could be like that movie that his career would go in a different direction if people had seen him in this movie at a time where he was at like a higher part of his acting career, because I think that not only does he play the role very well, but he there's something about how there's an innocence and an intelligence that he has that I think was actually very realistic, and almost like kids that I grew up with were, could have looked at him and ended up like him, but it just turns out like, no, this is just how kids are.
Yeah.
And ended up being. I mean, he's almost like the stereotypical computer kid, hacker kid, that from like the 90s.
Yeah.
So, and I think that the way he played him was very well done. And if I had to pick a second character, because he's the star, it would be Ali Sheedy. Ali Sheedy, I thought was great.
Awesome. She was so great. And I really liked that she was such like this very down to earth girl next door, had a motorcycle, ran everywhere. She ran through the neighborhood all the time.
And it wasn't really like,
and it wasn't a love story.
While they were both like, she was kind of flirty, but not like super flirty. It wasn't even like a romantic kind of thing. They were just kind of friends, and they had kind of a connection. He helped her with her grades, and they made each other laugh, and she kind of got kind of interested in like the things that he was doing, but they weren't like together.
Well, and they make it clear like he doesn't have a lot of friends.
No.
So he's got those two weird hacker nerds.
Super intelligent, not a lot of friends. Perfect target for the Russians to make him a spy.
Did Strickland ever have any hair?
Oh, that is the other thing about this movie. This was the first movie that we saw that actor in, and then later you see Back to the Future and like, hey, it's Strickland.
He was an evil FBI agent in a movie.
Was he that evil? He was just doing his job.
Whatever. I know.
Those, I think that's the other thing about this movie too. Like watching it as a kid, you're thinking like, oh, all these guys are bad they're like the man. Now I watch it now, I'm like, they're all just doing their freaking job.
They're doing their job, but I mean, I feel like the scene where he had been in McKittrick's office, and McKittrick's like, "So, who are you working with? Who's
Nobody.
Nobody. Oh, really? Who are you going to Paris with?" And that McKittrick was just so stubborn, assuming that there was someone else that he was working with, and it wasn't just an accident. I mean, that's really what it was. It wasn't. He accidentally stumbled into this.
But see, it wasn't about like, oh, they wouldn't listen to him because he's a kid or anything like that. That's how scared people were, and that's what their job was.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I also learned from this movie as a kid was the whole like DEFCON 5, DEFCON 4, DEFCON 3, and like if you get DEFCON 1, it's World War 3 kind of thing. And I mean, that's how I knew about this, about that thing. And just the fact that they constantly were like showing that in the movie, and then like they'd cut to that, or they'd have the general be like, "We're at DEFCON 2," you know, and go and like doing that really kind of showcases the fear and paranoia that at any moment an attack can be imminent.
Yep.
And that they all had to be prepared. And those people in the military at that point, that was their job.
Yeah.
And, you know, it sucks, but I mean, that's just, that was what, at the time, especially, you know, again, there's this whole kind of fear-mongering aspect of a lot of movies, I think, from the 80s that were kind of just pushing like this whole like, be afraid of Russians, communism is bad, you know, all of that. And not that those things aren't bad, but it was being heightened as opposed to trying to educate.
Yeah. I like the scene towards the very end when they finally are all in that war room together. And, you know, Falcon says to them, "Why would Russia do this? You know, if Russia is saying this has," because he was trying to convince them that it was all a simulation, that nothing was actually happening. And he's like, "Why would this have happened? It's completely unprovoked. Why?" You know, and just this kind of pause to do a little critical thinking in the moment and be like, do you realize like they are signing up to kill everybody on the planet?
Well, and by doing this, the whole idea of if we launch an attack, they're going to launch a counterattack. So it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
There's no winner.
I love the part when the computer is running through all the simulations and it was showing all of the different war simulations. Like there was like a NATO simulation, there was a satellite simulation. It just kind of had these different names. The China-based one, it was so interesting. I mean, stuff that we understand now as adults because we're more worldly than we were when we were 7, 8 years old watching this.
Right.
But
I mean, I picked this movie not just because it was something I grew up on. It's a movie I wanted to revisit, and I'm glad we did. Like I said, I'm really glad that I got to revisit it with older eyes. It's really it's interesting watching this, not really understanding, like being too young in the 80s to understand what the Cold War was about, and only being able to see it reflected in the movies. Because like when the Berlin Wall went down, like, oh, yay, there's a wall there that's dividing these two parts of a country, not knowing all the history behind it and why it's there and what it all means. Yeah. You don't get that until you get older. So being able to rewatch this again was kind of interesting. And the only other point that I wanted to make, because I don't really think I need to pick my favorite scene because I like a lot of the scenes in this movie and I've mentioned a lot of them, but along the same lines that we've been talking about, I'm always amazed at watching movies, and we're watching a bunch of movies, seeing airports. Oh yeah. In movies pre 9/11 versus post 9/11.
Yep, there is no picking someone up at a gate anymore.
Or just kind of walking around and like
carrying more than 3 ounces of a liquid in your carry-on.
There's a scene where David flies to Oregon, and then Ali Sheedy's character, when her character Jennifer surprises him at the gate at the airport, and he's like, "You shouldn't be here because I'm in trouble," kind of thing. But and then she kind of goes along with the journey with him the rest of the movie. the airport just looks like everything just looks so different in an
Yeah.
airport now. And the other movie where, like, when we talked about Almost Famous, there's an airport scene in that. There are a couple airport scenes in
Yeah.
that, and I'm just like, airports are so different now.
Airports are very, very different.
Yeah.
Can I mention the funniest thing that happens in this movie?
Sure.
So, after, when David's deep in his research, trying to figure out how to break into Falcon's system, he realizes it's got to be Joshua. Joshua's got to be the name. Really, well, it says that he died. Or it says that Falcon died. Oh, really? How old was he? Oh, he was really old.
Yes, he was 41.
I was cracking up so much last night. I mean, I know that it had to be a joke back in the 80s, but man, it's like, oh, okay, 41's really old, and it's okay that you're dead at 41. Okay. I was laughing so hard.
Yeah, that was hard to watch.
Apparently when Jack used to watch this as a kid, his parents thought that line was incredibly funny too, for the same reason. Like,
yeah,
41.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. That is really old.
Yeah. Considering now, like, what 41 was, 50 years ago is now like 61 or 71 now.
Oh God, I laughed so hard.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I remember seeing that scene and it being like eye-opening.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are really old like us, hopefully you'll chuckle at that too,
yeah.
or roll your eyes,
or whenever you get to those ages, then maybe you'll find it funny. But do you have any other final thoughts about War Games?
Other than it's a great movie. I think
I'm thrilled you put it on the list. I'm really thrilled with the pairing we had this week. I thought it was really cool to have these two movies that kind of cover really big ideas
and
in very different ways.
Paranoia in different ways too.
Yeah.
And
I mean, one on a very global context, one on a very personal context.
Yeah.
I thought it was just, and these movies are very of their times. I mean, it's very, 1983 is just pulsing through War Games. 1997 with the technology we saw there, and really that movie didn't even deal with a ton of technology, which
it was mainly just a couple times when, well, it's funny watching this. Like, he had a car phone, and it's like the difference
because he was rich. He had a car phone.
He had a car phone, and he had like, I think he had like kind of a cell phone before cell phones blew up, and but technology was not a main focus in the game like it was in War Games.
I mean, window handles were an important piece of technology. I mean, that was, that was as basic as it got for him.
Yeah. So,
but no, I'm thrilled that we got to rewatch these. I hadn't watched War Games in many, many years, so a lot of this kind of felt like brand new to me.
Yeah. And like I said, I thought Matthew Broderick,
he was great. He was, I guess, 20 when he was in this movie.
Yeah.
So if he had done this after doing, just kind of thinking about what you said about if Ferris Bueller had come out and then War Games and what kind of, where his career would have gone, he would have been like 26, 27 playing this kid. He had to be very young, and I'm so glad this movie happened way before Ferris Bueller.
Oh, yeah. I just think that
they would have had to cast someone else.
I just think that, he could have. I wonder what his career would have been like, because he's always had kind of like a young face. So like everyone had, it was always hard for a long time for him to picture him in roles where he was playing
like
his
a mature
age
person
or his age, his actual age. I mean, like, because you said he was like 20 when
he was 20 when
he was 20 when he filmed this, and
so I think he was like 24 when he did Ferris Bueller.
Right, and again, it gets back to the whole like
adults playing
teenagers in the 80s kind of thing. I mean, if they were to actually get a 16-year-old like John Cusack, who was probably about 16 in 1983, they could have done that and got an actual 16-year-old.
Yeah.
And,
and John Cusack did like nerdy computer stuff in 16 Candles.
Yes. So there you go. Had to get that in there.
I know you did.
But maybe we'll ask him someday.
Maybe.
We're working on it. All right. So thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much.
If you want to take a break from hacking your school to try and change your grades or try and play global thermonuclear war, visit us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We do have a YouTube channel, so you can listen to us on YouTube if you are at work or someplace where you don't have your phone near you.
Are there any other hacker movies that you guys like that you think we should watch someday?
Hackers is a fun movie. Angelina Jolie.
Never seen it.
What? Oh my God.
If you guys could see what he looks like when he says this, I swear.
Adding it to the list. All right. Everybody, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much.